this
What's he doing?
is to go even further beyond.
When it comes to anime, there are few which have the same widespread appeal as Dragon Ball Z. It single-handedly wrote the book on standard shonen anime and brought Japanese animation to the forefront of our attentions and our TV screens here in the States.
With the recent continuation of the Dragon Ball franchise through Dragon Ball Super, we recently wanted to take a look back into the original anime series that won over the western side of the world, and let anime become the media powerhouse that it's shaped to be today. Countless works have been inspired by what was supposed to be a gag manga, and today we'll be going over some of the many reasons that led to its perennial success.
For me, Dragon Ball is formative, so I'd like nothing more than to gush here about one of my favorite series of all time and talk about why DBZ matters.
Alright, so this is the pilot of what we are tentatively naming Real Talk Bros.
Yeah, Real Talk Bros. So the idea is that we're just going to try and have the most real conversation possible about things that matter to one or both of us. And we're going to start with something that Roger and I connected on from early on in our friendship when we were teenagers, and that's DBZ.
And basically DBZ more or less led to a best friendship, and I'm sure it did much more than that for like a lot of other relationships and a lot of other people. And one of those reasons is because it was just so widespread. It was the major anime. It's the thing that pioneered a lot of things that we take for granted in shonen anime specifically today.
Yeah, I mean, like I speak for I think a lot of people when I say that, you know, I'm a big fan of anime right now. But, like, a lot of the tropes that I know in anime today, like, if you think about, like, anime that have, like, power-ups or things like that, or, like, you know, power scaling of any form, Dragon Ball wrote the rulebook way back when, and it's something that we kind of didn't realize at the time. We were watching such an important shonen anime when we watched DBZ on Toonami.
Yeah, and the other thing is anime and manga before it, like for example Fist of the Northern Star and stuff like that, like they had powerful like characters and like people that, you know, you could relate to a little bit, but at the same time there was no really overarching plot stuff. There was no really like major developments. There was no huge character growths. Right.
And I remember I was a big fan of Sonic the Hedgehog games when I was little too, and there was someone who pointed out that, you know, Super Sonic and Shadow the Hedgehog and the concept of Shadow and like Super Shadow, like it was basically just like Goku and Vegeta copied in a lot of ways.
Pretty much.
But that's the case a lot of the time. You know, like it's hard to write sort of an anti-hero character in any anime and not think immediately like, okay, how is he going to be different than Piccolo or Vegeta? Like, how is this character going to be distinct from the people like who basically define the archetypes of the anti-hero in anime, or the goofy shonen protagonist that Goku sort of defined? Is there a goofy shonen protagonist that predates Goku? I'd have to think about it.
Probably not, to be honest. I can't think of one. I mean, don't get me wrong, there are like different types. Like, I'm sure if you go back far enough, you could find, for example, the boxing anime, Ashita no Joe or something.
Right.
Like, he's a bit of like a, you know, do his own kind of a thing, but he's more like rougher on the edges than goofy.
So so it's like, it's hard to think about like any goofy shonen protagonists that have happened since DBZ without kind of seeing like, okay, this takes its DNA from DBZ. So let's talk about the characters of Dragon Ball and why we like them so much.
Yeah. Okay, well, I can start us off really well. The first major character development that I can think of in terms of like really doing a gradual 180, but a 180 nonetheless, is Piccolo.
Oh yeah, Piccolo like probably is my favorite part of the original Dragon Ball series. Just to start, King Piccolo, and then Ma Junior, or you know, Piccolo Junior as we come to know him in the end. That was always the part of Dragon Ball that left the strongest impression on me. Mm-hmm. And then I would say that, you know, taking King Piccolo, turning him into sort of like an evil but different character at the end, and then really fleshing him out in the first saga, or the whole Saiyan saga of DBZ. It's a really satisfying arc for Piccolo.
He has like a entire change of heart. Like Gohan basically reawakens like some sort of humanity in him.
Yeah, and it's super interesting because King Piccolo completely lacked any of that in his character. He was all very binary, like, evil protagonist, wants to rule all of humanity, yada yada yada. But Junior, and then by extension Piccolo in DBZ, he always seemed like he was a more fleshed out character. Maybe because he was a baby, born into this new world, and he didn't have the same sort of, King Piccolo's had that crazy backstory about how he came to resent humans and stuff like that. But Piccolo Jr., he had his memories, but he was starting fresh largely, and so he got really humanized through his relationship with Gohan, which I think was a really cool way to develop Piccolo into being something more than just like, an anti-hero or anything like that. Because honestly, for the rest of DBZ on that point onwards, Piccolo's a good guy, I would say.
Yeah, and the person that comes and more or less fills his shoes and does it even better, in my opinion, because it's more of a rivalry, is Vegeta.
Yeah, now Vegeta is interesting because you can draw a lot of similarities between Piccolo and Goku, and then Vegeta and Goku. But there's so much distinct about Vegeta in terms of his Saiyan pride. I think Piccolo doesn't have anything similar to that.
Yeah,
And
that's
so-
the thing. Vegeta, more or less, with Piccolo, it's like he kind of has it's a poor reason, but it's a reason nonetheless of, okay, my father wanted to kill this guy. He got killed by this guy. I need to get revenge.
Right.
Vegeta, it's more or less, I have a birthright that you are, like, stepping on.
Right. And so, like, you think about, like, the way Toriyama set up, like, the Saiyan class system. So there's, like, elites and lower class, right? And so Vegeta, he's not just an elite Saiyan. He's the prince of all Saiyans. So he's taught from a young age that, he's meant to be the strongest, just like his father was the strongest in his eyes, I assume. So, one of the first things we see of, like, a baby Vegeta, it's in Bardock, the father of Goku. It's not necessarily canon, but it's canon. It's canon. It's him, tanking a bunch of Cybermen, who we kind of know later are sort of on par with, like, Raditz, right? Like I know power levels are meaningless, but they have, like, a similar power level, like 1200 or something like that. And so it really shows us from the start, like, even as a little kid, Vegeta was set up to be one of the strongest of all Saiyans. So to see Goku, who is not only a lower class Saiyan put on Earth, but basically a human. He lived his entire life not even as a Saiyan. To see him sort of become stronger than him, Vegeta develops a physical need himself to become stronger than Goku, which is a really compelling character side that I think people miss when they talk about Vegeta as, like, just whiny or whatever. Because you think about him going Super Saiyan, right? That's such a good scene.
Yeah, and people often, like, misunderstand it. Like, they don't understand the implications and why it is such a good scene in and of itself.
Yeah. I mean, like I said, it's like, Vegeta in that moment when he was on the moon training, he felt a need to go stronger than Goku, which, if you look at the sort of Funimation logic for Super Saiyan, it's the whole power comes in response to a need, not a desire. And that's a perfect moment for that. Goku needed it to beat Frieza, to defend the universe. Krillin just died. Vegeta needed to claim his birthright. He physically felt that need in that moment, which I just think is such a cool way to look at it that really makes Vegeta more interesting than just sort of a whiny, arrogant prince. Don't get me wrong, Vegeta's a whiny, arrogant prince, but that's only one dimension to him,
Right, and another thing is one of the things that more or less leads into another segment of character development is I think that Dragon Ball Z has, like, the first instance of a really, really good villain in Frieza. Like, just plain, you can't find a way to justify and like him.
I mean, yeah. I mean, look how big the reaction was whenever Revival of F was announced, right? People were so excited to see Frieza again because Frieza, again, we talk about Dragon Ball Z writing the rules on a lot of things in shonen anime. I mean,
right.
I dare you to find me an antagonist in a shonen anime before Frieza that had the same sort of scale and impact that he had. Like they set him up pretty much from the beginning of the Saiyan saga, kind of, because Raditz and Vegeta and Nappa are working for this sort of grander organization, and then you eventually find out it's Frieza, and pretty much all of Dragon Ball for the first 200 episodes almost, between the beginning and when Goku fights Frieza. Maybe like 180 to 200 episodes. They set that entire thing up, and they deliver too, because Frieza has such an imposing presence that has lasted decades in terms of its widespread appeal, I think.
Right, and that's the thing. Dragon Ball Z kind of basically created the anime industry in the United States. Like, if you don't have Dragon Ball Z and a couple other shows, don't get me wrong, like it was the front player of that whole Toonami lineup, but regardless, it was the thing that was a catalyst for anime exploding in the United States and having popularity, and leading to things like Crunchyroll being such a popular service, and like getting shows like Avatar being a thing, like a complex anime kind of show that normally wouldn't be on like something like Nickelodeon.
Yeah, I mean, like if you think about like Avatar, or even like the original Cartoon Network Teen Titans series, those are sort of character-driven series which have a big focus on their animation style, and I think that was something that was totally taken from the success of anime in the West, which you can't talk about without talking about DBZ. Again, it was another big part of it was just general acceptance, right? Like, a lot of people didn't realize they were watching an anime, but they started to accept anime because they were watching DBZ without even knowing it. They didn't even realize kind of what it was. And then anime kind of had that weird stigma because, there's stuff like Naruto, and then it was kind of cool to hate on Naruto. But it was always pretty acceptable to like DBZ, I think, whether people realized it or not. Or whether people
it definitely didn't bring you as much hate as watching something like Naruto. People would be like, "Oh, ninja weeb stuff." Like Dragon Ball Z is literally just hype people fighting each other, like baseline.
Yeah. It's still weeb stuff, at its core, whatever weeb stuff means. But yeah, another thing I'll say that probably helped out DBZ a lot for Western fans is that a lot of us were also playing the Dragon Ball video games.
It made it very much more acceptable, and it was definitely something that was really good. Like you had a different mix of games. Like you had the original Budokai series, which is a great fighter.
Yeah. Budokai's
Don't
so
get me
good.
wrong; they're more fan servicey than like actual fighters. If you want a real fighter, you kind of had to wait for Fighter Z this year of 2018.
Right, but also back then in like 2003, 2002, like we had no concept of what like a well balanced good fighting game was. As far as we knew, Budokai was like the best thing that came out up to that point, other than Smash Bros or something like that.
Right, if you're a little kid, you're like, I'm Super Saiyan 3 Goku. I want to beat up Yamcha and not have to worry about it.
Yeah, those are good games, and they also, what they achieved for us in the West was it made us feel like DBZ was a current thing that was happening. Because in reality, by the time DBZ started airing in the West, it had already completely ended, and I mean all the way up through the movies after the Boo Saga in Japan. I think Wrath of the Dragon came out in 1996, which is something
I think GT was done, to give you an idea, even though GT is not canon.
Yeah,
GT was done in Japanese.
Yeah, quick side note, we're not talking about Super, GT, or even most of the Boo Saga in this episode, just because that's not really what we think matters about DBZ, personally.
Right. By the Boo Saga, DBZ was established in both Japan and the States. Like, it was far cemented in. Like, if you take away the Boo Saga, yes, you lose some of Dragon Ball and some of the great things about it. Like, there are some good moments in the Boo Saga, but you don't lose, like, the essence of Dragon Ball.
Yeah, and I think we really just wanted to touch on, Frieza and his impact and how he really set the bar. Cell did pretty well too, and I think we ought to talk about the Cell Saga for a little bit.
Okay.
I would say that one of the big things that DBZ did really well all the way up through the Cell games was set up Gohan to be the new hero that sort of took on Goku's mantle, and they did that in a lot of ways because they were always sort of setting up. What does Gohan have that Goku doesn't? Now, first, start with his namesake, right? He's named after Grandpa Gohan, like the man, the myth, the legend. And so it was really important for them to show us, Gohan has humanity. He's half human, which Goku had too, but, Gohan really was a human. He had human ideals, so he was intelligent too. And that was something that they always sort of wanted to do in the writing. They never really quite got there. I can't really remember too many strategies Gohan did that were like super smart in battle. It was always Goku coming up with the really smart battle strategies, as far as I remember. But they still were always setting up, Gohan has this latent ability which far surpasses Goku. And all the way up through the end of the Cell games, they did a really good job, I think, on delivering that narrative.
Yeah, and that's the thing. After the Cell games, it kind of gets quashed immediately, let's be real. But
yeah.
Up until that point, like, you kind of realize that Dragon Ball Z isn't a story about Goku, it's a story about Gohan, in my opinion.
Yeah. I always really liked the Legacy of Goku games, because if you think about it, like, what is a legacy, right? It's what you leave behind, and that was supposed to kind of be Gohan. The idea was that Goku's legacy, and that's why I like the movie BoJack Unbound so much, because it's pretty much the one case I can think of other than maybe the second Broly movie, where Goku's not around and Gohan has to handle it. And he does, and he takes on the big bad. He goes Super Saiyan 2 at the end. He has that whole thing, about how Bojack thought he could take over because his father wasn't there, but I'm my father's son. That was such a good moment, which I thought really sort of gave me the sort of satisfaction I wanted after seeing Gohan grow into the hero that defeated Cell. Cell was pretty good, I would think, just from a writing standpoint. He didn't have the same sort of narrative scope of Frieza, but as far as like how well they made him look and feel intimidating, I mean, think about when the first form of Cell shows up in the city, right? And when he's like draining all the people's life out of them.
Right. First stage Cell, I would say, is probably the most intimidating that he gets, to be honest, because after that, it's like you understand the implications of him getting stronger, but at that point, it's more or less kind of like banging action figures together. Like,
yeah, it's true. It's true.
like, because when I think of Perfect Cell, I don't think of like, oh no, this guy really, like, he's selfish, he's absorbed, he has an empire. Like, Frieza was like ultimate big bad. Like, he was oppressive. He killed a race of people that came back to haunt him. He was very eloquent. That's another thing about Frieza that kind of I think wrote the book, was he was very well spoken in both. I mean, in the original, obviously, and like people probably argue that the original Funimation not so much, but I can say in Kai he is, obviously,
right.
And that's the thing. Frieza was intimidating, but he was kind of like flowery. You know what I mean? Like, he wasn't like he wasn't like big, brawly. Like, even his form, he's not even that big. He's literally like this tiny little thing, but he's like supposed to be the strongest thing in the universe.
And you know what? I think that's a really good point, and that's pretty much why Frieza has such sort of a chilling effect. I know Frieza cooler, chilling, but I mean, literally, it gives Frieza sort of this really cool vibe. Just have this sort of like posh gentleman who also is the strongest effing thing that you've seen in the entire universe up to that point. Right. It was so cool and even scarier, right? Because it was like Frieza didn't bat an eye pretty much at all until Goku turned Super Saiyan. I mean, there were like moments, like the one time when Goku used his Kamehameha strategy underwater to get like a good hit on Frieza, and Frieza's like, that's the first time I felt pain in like I can't remember how long. And that's like a big, again, chilling moment because, Frieza still has the entire upper hand. Goku can't do anything to him. And it's a big accomplishment that someone even made Frieza feel pain. And at that point, he wasn't even using 50% of his power.
I think he was using like
1% of his power? Yeah.
Yeah, 1%, and then he cranks it up to 50 and says, I'm just going to end this, and Goku has to go Kaioken times 20 to even stand a chance. And he just burns through, and he's like, I got to use Spirit. I got nothing. Nothing on this guy. He had to fulfill an ancient alien prophecy just to be like able to beat him. Which
was really cool too. And we're kind of focusing a lot on Frieza and like the first big part of DBZ, but honestly, this episode is why DBZ matters, and I think it's impossible to talk about this without gushing about how good it was all the way up through Frieza. Because if you think about it, like they set up both Frieza and the Legend of the Super Saiyan very early on in DBZ. And it was something that, Vegeta was always sort of aiming to become the Super Saiyan so that he could defeat Frieza, which was another compelling part about Vegeta's character. You touched on this earlier, which is that, Vegeta has so much development when you consider his relationship as a subordinate of Frieza, and how he always wanted to become stronger and get revenge. Vegeta, he figured out from Zarbon that his planet was destroyed by Frieza, right? I think
Dodoria maybe one of the two,
Dodoria or Zarbon, but then he doesn't. But he always wanted to overtake Frieza. I think that was always his big play.
He kind of always inherently knew that Frieza, like, he did some kind of skullduggery and like messed him.
Even then, I think Vegeta's Saiyan pride just made it so that because I think he originally wanted the Dragon Balls on Earth, or he always wanted the Dragon Balls for immortality.
To Earth. Yeah, he went to Earth because he's like, I need an edge to.
Yeah, because he wanted to be able to defeat Frieza. Right, and so yeah, because I remember. He started to put those plans in motion when he ran into Kui on planet Namek, and that was before he knew that Frieza had blown up his planet. But anyway, so Vegeta sets up this Legend of the Super Saiyan, and sort of like always is reminding the viewers, like, this is what Vegeta fears and wants to be more than anything else. So like whenever he sees Goku get a big power increase when he arrives on Namek, Vegeta's like, oh, well, maybe he's become a Super Saiyan. And then it's like a kind of funny thing. Like, every time Vegeta gets a power boost, he also thinks he's
right. He keeps like
Saiyan.
Thinking, oh, it's Super Saiyan. And, like, it just keeps building and building. And that's one part of it. And the other part of it, so you have Super Saiyan building. Then you have Frieza building, because even before we see Frieza, King Kai says to Goku, don't fuck with this guy.
Yeah.
Like, you can't win. You will not be able to do anything. Avoid him. And Goku's like, okay, I guess. Like,
Right.
whatever. I'm gonna, like, if I have to, I have to. And King Kai's like, dude, don't freaking, sass me. This is some serious shit.
And up to that point in the series, like, we were introduced to Kami as God. But then we met, like, King Kai in early DBZ. And then that was sort of like the highest power that we could have possibly fathomed at the time. And that person who trained Goku was saying, do not touch Frieza. So to see all of that build up into the fight whenever Krillin dies, and then Goku goes Super Saiyan for the first time, that's just such a powerful moment.
You want to talk about iconic scenes.
Dude, I don't think any fan would ever say that there's a scene more powerful and chilling than the first time you see Goku go Super Saiyan against Frieza.
I mean, there's a reason Team 4-Star put it at the top. Shout out Team 4-Star.
Oh, yeah, because they had their list of, like, the best iconic moments of DBZ or something like that.
Yeah, and Super Saiyan was obviously number one. They're like, you can't judge us for this. And it's like, you can't.
No, it's because what else possibly beats that? So yeah, I mean, Goku going Super Saiyan was just such a big, powerful moment. It was the buildup that we had gotten after, again, I think 180 or 200 episodes. Granted, a lot of that was filler, but anyway, but even in Kai, what is it, like 30 or 40 episodes out of like the whole 98? A good chunk of the narrative overall, or a good fraction of it, was all building up to Goku versus Frieza, Goku going Super Saiyan in that moment, and just having such a big payoff. And, that's another thing that I think just really carried over into other shonen manga, was the idea of a transformation. So you look at, like, Gear Second in One Piece, whenever Luffy is fighting Blueno. Similar thing, they build up CP9, the organization Luffy's fighting against, to be sort of so strong that they just body, like, the Straw Hats. They can't do anything.
Yeah, right. They take Robin and, like, literally effortlessly. Like, they can't do anything, the Straw Hats.
And I think honestly, it's even pretty visually similar if you look at Gear Second Luffy and Kaioken Goku. It's a similar concept. They kind of have a red hue. It's stamina draining on them. They can't keep it up for too long, but they have like a really great power boost in that moment. Mm-hmm. And again, whether or not Eiichiro Oda was thinking, oh, I'm gonna do a Kaioken reference here, I think the inspiration is undeniable. Toriyama wrote the rulebook again on transformations. He had the Kaioken, and there was definitely inspiration when you think about any shonen anime that followed. People often talk about Bleach and like swords transformations and how they're basically just Super Saiyan swords. I haven't watched Bleach, but I
haven't watched Bleach either, so we can't really talk about it. But I definitely know there's a reason why I was included in the same discussion. And like you can talk about like that was a part of the big three with Naruto, obviously, but. You can even look at other shonen manga and be like, okay, for example, Hunter x Hunter. You can look at Meruem, which is an amazing villain. We're not talking about him, but he's an amazing villain. And you can juxtapose his picture next to Frieza and Cell, and you're like, if they did a fusion, I could see Meruem coming out and being him visually. Yeah,
and again, not talking too much about Meruem, but I would say that he has pretty much the same imposing presence as Frieza.
Condescending... like kind of well-spoken,
brutally
ruthless.
Powerful.
Yes,
like brutally powerful. Like so powerful that people around him just cannot touch him. He has the people who serve him and the people who die. That's the only two categories of people he has.
In the very beginning, yeah.
And he really does, like you said, look like a fusion of Frieza.
Yeah,
and Cell.
like maybe they did a fusion dance.
Yeah, but anyway, so again, there are just so many great things that shonen anime have iterated on DBZ from to sort of create their own great versions of these tropes and honestly improve on them in a lot of ways. But shonen anime has gotten better, but DBZ, I think, even stands the test of time in a lot of ways.
It does. I mean, like, don't get me wrong. If you're going to show somebody DBZ, don't show them the original. Like, as much as that pains me to say, it's too long, it's too badly paced. Like, they were obviously trying to drain some money, a lot of filler.
Oh, you mean don't show them the original DBZ?
Don't show them the original. If you're going to show them something, show them Kai. And, like, if you can't get over the fact that Kai comes with, it's the original soundtrack. If you love the Japanese, you can be good with that. If you like the Faulkner soundtrack, if you like the Kai soundtrack before it got plagiarized. That's another gripe in of itself. But if you can find ways to kind of fine-tune it. I know that I've found ways to juxtapose Faulkner's tracks onto Kai. And... you can do that, and that's the recommendation I have. If you're going to look back on it, and it does stand the test of time, because DBZ you when you're watching it, if you've never seen it before, you might think, okay, this is a lot of tropes that, I've seen in a bunch of anime, but you need to understand that it wrote the playbook. Like, all these other anime that you probably saw that came out after kind of borrowed a lot from DBZ, whether it be like a compelling main character that, like, is a bit selfish, but, ultimately does care, an anti-hero like rival that, is a bit kind of standoffish, but ultimately, kind of can see the error, like, not see the error of his ways, but come around, morally.
Yeah, I think it's pretty similar to, like, if you're critiquing Citizen Kane, you can say, oh, well, I don't like the narrative, or, oh, this is problematic, or whatever. But what you got to do is you got to look at the filming techniques that it's standardized in the industry. And you got to see, okay, this is why this was important, and see what about it even holds up today. Same if you're talking about, an NES platformer, like the first Super Mario Bros. Is it fun by today's platforming standards? Maybe for a lot of people, but to a lot of other people, it's probably prohibitively difficult. And I understand that, but you still have to look at it, how it invented physics-based platforming in video games. And so think about Dragon Ball in that guise when you think about the tropes of shonen anime, which a lot of you are probably very familiar with, and see how a lot of these tropes got their start in Dragon Ball Z, and try and really see if they hold up today in your eyes, because to us they really do.
And ultimately, when you look at these tropes and you look at these things that it, wrote the book on, and it brought popularity to, and it made people understand, and it, like, made compelling cases for certain things, whether it be characters, whether it be plot things, whether it be even just being hype. Like, it's just a good time to watch DBZ if you don't really want to think about it too. You can have that kind of fun with it. If you think about it, ultimately, that's why DBZ matters, is because, like, when you come down to it, you can get a lot of different things out of DBZ. It's multifaceted.
Yeah, and I would say that for me, DBZ matters because it shaped me in terms of the media I watch. And it's really something that I can still watch today and just kind of revel in how good a lot of the parts of it are that work together, and how so much of it influenced media that I love today that has improved on a lot of what DBZ did. But at the end of the day, I'll always be able to go back to Kai specifically, because I can't handle the pacing of the original. I'll always be able to go back to Kai and really just enjoy watching these characters that I love, enjoy watching a good old beam struggle, and enjoy sort of reveling in this series, which I know introduced an entire world of people who knew nothing about anime to Japanese animation, and sort of opened our eyes to a whole new plethora of media we would have never seen otherwise. And that's ultimately another one of the big reasons DBZ matters. So yeah, just don't watch GT.
Don't watch GT. You can watch Super, but, don't hate us, because more or less we think that Super also did not really continue DBZ's legacy very well. But that's a story for another time.
But we also feel that way about the Buu Saga, so we're not hypocrites.
That's true. If you look at the Buu Saga, had plenty of bad things too that exist in Super. But again, this is why DBZ matters, not why it sucks. So ultimately, yeah, I guess that's it. That's all I have to say on the matter.
So that was our first episode of Real Talk Bros. We'll hopefully be making more episodes of these. And for now, what's a good punchline we can say that relates to Dragon Ball?
I don't know. Dang, you put me on the spot like this. Shit.
So will the Real Talk Bros continue their story with another franchise they like to talk about? Or will they fade in the sea of obscure Dragon Ball videos on YouTube, never to be found by anyone ever again? Find out next time on Real Talk Bros Z. Or just Real Talk Bros.